Shalom, 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 Israel. This is Captain Paul Israel from Kingdom Builders of Israel LLC, and today's class topic is going to be on celebrating 4th of July is pagan. Again, Israel, today's class topic is going to be on celebrating 4th of July is pagan. Okay, Israel, many of our people don't understand about these pagan holidays that America pushes. Okay, so we're going to get the history of the 4th of July, okay, and see what it's really about. Okay, is it really about the independence of America, or is it really about the independence of something else? Okay, so that's why this lesson needs to be taught to our people who are the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans of today. Okay, the Hebrew Israelites who are the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans of today. Also with the other tribes that scattered abroad through the four corners of the earth. Okay, they need to get this understanding to understand that the 4th of July is pagan. Okay, so get out your notes, get out your pen and your pad. Let's take these notes, Israel, so we can learn what this Bible is really saying about these particular pagan holidays. Okay, but we are going over the 4th of July, okay, topic. Okay, we first going to start out in the book of Exodus chapter 20 verse 3, which of course we bring out on each lesson that we do about these pagan holidays to explain that we're not supposed to be worshiping any other God but the Most High Yah. Okay, so we got to go to the book of Exodus chapter 20 verse 3. It says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." So this is a commandment that Moses gave to who? The children of Israel, okay, who are the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans of today. So the Most High Yah gave Moses these laws to give to the children of Israel. So let's read this again. Exodus chapter 20 verse 3, it says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." So again, we not supposed to worship any other gods but the Most High Yah. Okay, we worship the Father by what? Applying his law, statutes, and commandments in our life. So when we worship other gods, that means we following the customs of the other nations, because the customs of the other nations go into following and worshiping other gods. And primarily the 4th of July is going into a form of worshiping another god or other deities, okay, outside of the Most High Yah. Okay, so it has nothing to do with the Most High Yah's righteousness by celebrating the 4th of July. Okay, so now we got the understanding that we're not supposed to worship any other gods out here but the Most High Yah, right? So now we got this article that's on the Secret History blogspot.com. It's like a website that details certain things. This article was posted on Tuesday, June the 22nd of 2010. It says, "This week in the secret history, the 4th of July's pagan roots." So you see this, Israel says pagan roots. So again, people in general that do their research understand that the 4th of July come from paganism. So initially, in the 4th of July holiday, they have Uncle Sam picture as the patriotic icon, as you see right here in this imagery right here with the so-called white man's imagery. But when you scroll down, Uncle Sam kind of looks something like a wizard. Okay, it says, or Gandalf in disguise. So Uncle Sam somewhat looks like a wizard character, right? So this particular person who did this article said Uncle Sam looks like a Gandalf in disguise. As you can see, the long beard, the crazy looking hair, right? So I'm gonna show you what the word Gandalf means. Okay, when you go to Google, Gandalf goes into somewhat like the character from the Lord of the Rings character. Okay, I don't know if y'all familiar with that movie called Lord of the Rings, and they had a character in there called the Gandalf, and the Gandalf was a wizard. Okay, when we go to Wikipedia, Gandalf, it says, is a protagonist in J.R.R. Tolkien's novels The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. He is a wizard, one of the Istari order, and the leader of the Fellowship of the Ring. So again, this is going into a wizard or something like a witchcraft similarities. Okay, that's why you have when you type in the word Gandalf or look at the imagery that comes up on Wikipedia, that Gandalf character looks like a person that's considered a wizard or a witch. Okay, a person that's practicing witchcraft, basically. That's what that's getting into, like majestic powers and everything like that. That's what that's getting into. But the 4th of July had somewhat replaced the wizard or the Gandalf character that looked like a wizard, would go back to witchcraft or sorcery imagery, to going to Uncle Sam. You know, so similar imagery. Okay, so pagans replace certain imagery so it don't come off going back to somebody being a wizard. Okay, but they just say, hey, it's going to be iconic to Uncle Sam. So Uncle Sam imagery replaced the wizard scenario. Okay, so when we go to what this article is saying right here, when we zoom in a little bit, let me zoom in a little bit more. Okay, he says in this particular article, it says some of the best documented examples of the survival of pagan ritual into the modern era are the traditional bonfires on June 23rd, small-scale descendants from the great Celtic fire festival of Midsummer Eve, celebrating the summer solstice. See, the summer solstice. This is going into the pagan custom. So the pagans had a calendar as well, which we're going to show as well, which the pagans used to worship their certain gods and deities around a certain time frame period during a certain year. Okay, so they'll pick certain months or certain seasons to worship their idol gods. Okay, and this person that did this article is saying that this particular deity or goddess or god that the pagans was worshiping was during the summer solstice. Okay, so it was a group of pagans that was worshiping a certain deity around the summer solstice, and they were saying traditionally it was bonfires that was lit around the time of June 23rd, around that time frame on June the 23rd. But I'm going to explain why they mentioned June the 23rd. Okay, it says the midsummer festival lay exactly opposite the winter solstice in the cycle of a year. So just like I said earlier, you have a winter solstice, which of course the pagans had customs of worshiping idol gods around the winter time. So just like with Christmas, they worship those idol deities around the winter solstice. That's why you have Christmas, okay, around winter time. So the pagans or the other nations can worship their idol god around the Christmas time, because it goes in line with the winter solstice. It says in the cycle of the year, and the summer rivalry was a mirror image of that in December. So again, the winter solstice occurred around December time frame, because that's winter time. So in the same analogy, around the summertime, which we have of course around June or July, that's when you get your summer time frame, which of course the pagans worship their idol gods around the summer solstice. It says perhaps even more rituals in the more temperate weather, the focus of the festival was fire. So this particular festival, right, that was around the time of the summer solstice, around June 23rd, was a festival that was revolving around fire. See, notice the key word fire. Used to bring life-giving power of the sun god down to earth. There were huge bonfires on every hilltop. So again, this particular festival that occurred around June the 23rd entailed fire, okay, like bonfires or wood been lit up with fire, okay, to give reverence to, it says, the sun god, okay, the sun god. So when you look at in modern day time, the 4th of July, what do 4th of July usually entail? Fireworks, right? It entails fireworks. Right? This is the reason why these pagan holidays, which of course they changed the name a little bit, go and tell with nature, okay, to give off some type of idol custom ritual, which our people don't know nothing about. See, our people are thinking 4th of July has to do with the Independence Day of America, when it doesn't. Okay, it has something to do with idol worshiping of the sun god and other deities as well. It says there were huge bonfires on every hilltop. Some communities built a giant wooden wheel, wrapped it in tar-soaked rags, ignited it, and set it rolling down the slope of the nearest hill. Men and women with blazing torches, so the men and women used to walk around with blazing torches, would run in huge clockwise circles around farm fields to ensure the health of the crop. After the fire ritual, see, fire ritual. So this is what the pagans was doing. So this particular person is bringing out the history on the summer solstice festival ritual that used to take place prior, before we get to the 4th of July situation. It says, after the fire rituals, the people would feast and drink long into the night. So when you fast forward up today, what do people generally do during the 4th of July? They party, they feast, they get drunk, and they party and they light fireworks all throughout the night, all the way up to morning time hours. Okay, this is going back to pagan customs. Okay, so now we got the similarities. It says, even after all Britain was converted to Christianity, these customs survived. So this particular person said in Europe, which it says in Britain, says even when the European countries converted over to Christianity, the pagan customs that was once known to be conducted in Europe survived, meaning the people that was converted over to Christianity still was practicing pagan customs. Okay, it says in rural communities, bonfires continue to be lit on Midsummer's Eve. It says later generations added fireworks to the festivities. So this is what these pagans did. They converted the bonfires that was mentioned right here, and then they converted over to being fireworks. That's why you have fireworks being lit around 4th of July time frame period. Okay, it says according to historian Ronald Hutton, these customs have a recorded history of almost 2 millennia, stretching back into the pagan past. So initially, okay, around June 23rd, around the summer solstice, you had the pagans that used to lit fire with these bonfires with sticks, with wooden sticks, and they used to run around with it. The men and women used to run around with it, okay, to give homage to the sun god. Okay, this is what these pagans used to do. That's why they had the imagery right here. But then eventually later on in years, they added fireworks. Okay, so that's why you have fireworks going on around the time of 4th of July. Okay, let me keep scrolling down. We're going to try to keep it simple, Israel. So what happened was, it was a change of the calendar. When you keep on reading, it says, this was especially the case with matters of the seasons and the calendar. Many of them had arrived in America before the calendar changed. They're talking about at one point in time, Europe used to go off the Julian calendar, but then it changed to the Gregorian calendar, which changed the time frame period of the days to worship these idol deities during these summer solstice or winter solstice situation. It says, and many districts in the mountains clung stubbornly to the old Christmas and to the calendar that for everyone else in the Western world was now 11 days late. So he's trying to say that it was a calendar, the Julian calendar, which had the summer solstice of the pagan rituals to be conducted on June the 23rd. But when they converted over to the Gregorian calendar, it pushed the summer solstice celebration from June the 23rd to what? 4th of July. Because 11 days from June 23rd is what? The 4th of July. When you count it down from on the actual Gregorian calendar. Okay. See, it says, meanwhile, the American colonies fought a war of independence, and when they had won it, they thought it fitting to designate a national day of celebration. They chose the 4th day of July to commemorate. So they said, so they they're putting it out there for the people. America putting it out there for the people, saying, yo, this is a day we're going to celebrate the independence. But that's not what that day is really entailing. It's deeper than that. It says they chose the 4th day of July to commemorate, so they said, the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. But was that the only reason for their choice? No, that wasn't their choice. That why they did it, because of the independence situation that America established in 1776. That wasn't the case. They did it based upon the summer solstice festival celebration. Okay, that's what it says. Back up in the hills, old Christmas still hung on like mist in a hollow. It says, and if the old Christmas lingered, what about its opposite number? The other great feast of pagan Europe. So they get to understand that the pagans was all in Europe. It says Midsummer's Eve. Okay, it says Slacky. It says it says, just as we look 11 days past Christmas to find old Christmas, we would look 11 days past June 23rd, current Midsummer's Eve, to find old Midsummer's Eve. Is it there, buried beneath the Gregorian calendar? So you see what I'm saying, Israel? The Gregorian calendar pushed the actual Midsummer's Eve, which was on June 23rd, to be on the 4th of July. It says, find a calendar and count for yourself 11 days past June 23rd. Your land, it says, your land neatly and defectively on the 4th of July. So based on America and also Europe converting over to the Gregorian calendar, it pushed the June 23rd Midsummer's Eve or summer solstice celebration of this particular feast that required bonfires to now to be pushed on the 4th of July, because the calendar, it was a change of calendar from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. Under the Julian calendar, the summer solstice or the Midsummer's Eve festival was celebrated on June 23rd. Now, under the Gregorian calendar, is now what? On the 4th of July. You see that, Israel? You see the manipulation of the so-called white man and his infrastructure? He has everybody thinking that, hey, it's a celebration of Independence Day of America, but meanwhile, it's actually a celebration of the sun god and all these other idol deities that go back to paganism. Okay. Let's see. Let's keep scrolling down. Okay, so Israel, that's the point I wanted to get out right there. That the scholars know that in general, 4th of July has nothing to do with the real actual day of independence in 1776 of America. Okay, has nothing to do with that. It has something to do with the worshiping of idols. Okay, so now we got the understanding, but also 4th of July go back to, of course, to other things going on with this understanding of paganism. So we got this other article that's titled Wiccan Celebrations and the Permanence of Change. Okay, this was an article too as well, but this is what the pagans do with bonfires, fire. Okay, it says, for Wiccans, celebration of summer solstice is a spiritual practice. So it says the summer solstice celebration is a spiritual practice. So again, it's going into witchcraft. Okay, it says summer solstice, a time with the northern hemisphere will experience the maximum hours of sunlight. Okay, this is by, I believe, a white woman named Helen A. Berger. Okay, it says summer solstice, a time when the northern hemisphere will experience the maximum hours of sunlight, takes place on June 21st and will be celebrated by followers of Wicca, a form of contemporary paganism, with a holiday known as Litha. So another form of paganism around the summer solstice would be Litha, or they'll have another word in modern term would be Wiccan or Wicca. Okay, but all go back to paganism. And the reason why the pagans, they wanted to worship around this time frame period of using bonfires is because when summertime hits, you see the sun more brighter due to the summertime. You see the sun out more longer. That's why it says summer solstice, a time when the northern hemisphere will experience the maximum hours of sunlight. This is why they did these pagan rituals around this time. Okay, but this is what they did. Okay, and this is what they continue to do to this day. But they go, instead of them calling themselves pagans, they refer to themselves as Wiccans. And we're going to go to Wicca. It says Wicca. On Wikipedia, it says Wicca. It says Wicca, it says, is a modern pagan religion. A modern pagan religion. Okay, you see that? Modern is, I mean, they changed it from being referred to as just pagan, but it made it more modern. It says scholars of religion characterize it as both a new religious movement and as part of as part of the occultist stream of Western esotericism. It was developed in England during the first half of the 20th century and was introduced to the public in 1954 by Gerald Gardner. Okay, so Gerald Gardner, so-called white man, was the one that introduced this new concept of the word Wicca. Okay, which he derived it from pagan religion. Okay, or pagan customs. Okay, the so-called white man. So when you're following the 4th of July or any concept of a certain ritual that occurs around the summertime, you worship in the so-called white man. Okay, and also you worship in the other gods of the nations, because they put different titles too as well. And also on this one, on this article called learnreligions.com, right? On learnreligions.com, you got, it says the article is titled 10 Deities of Litha, Summer Solstice, Gods and Goddesses. So the summer solstice, you know, that's going to the deities of Litha. See, the pagans gave this time frame a term called Litha. Instead of saying summer solstice, they're titled it Litha. But that's why it says the 10 deities of Litha. So you have different gods and different goddesses that occurs around the summer time frame under these different other nations' philosophy. Okay. See, it says this article is written by Patty Wigington. Okay, it says the summer solstice has long been a time when cultures celebrated the lengthening year. It is on this day, sometimes called Litha. You see that? They changed the name. Sometimes called Litha, that there is more daylight than any other time. A direct counterpoint to the darkness of Yule. Okay, it says no matter where you live or what you call it, chances are you can connect to a culture that honor a sun deity, meaning a nation of people that honor the sun goddess or the sun god around this time of the year. Here are just a few of the gods and goddesses from around the world that are connected with the summer solstice. So this particular person is going to give out different deities or different gods that was associated with the summer solstice time frame when these other nations were worshiping idol gods around the summertime. So they had a god named Amaterasu. They had a god named Amaterasu Shinto. They said this solar goddess is the sister of the moon deity. So basically it's going into the moon deity. Different deities is associated with too as well. And this goes back to, I think, a god in Japan. It says the storm god of Japan and is known as the goddess from which all light comes from. So again, it says she is much loved by her worshippers and treats them with warmth and compassion every year. It says every year in July she is celebrated in the streets of Japan. So this particular god named Shinto or Amaterasu is celebrated in the streets of Japan. So it has a god associated with this in Japan. Aten, which is a god in Egypt. It says this god was this god was at one point an aspect of Ra, but rather than being depicted as an anthropomorphic being like most of the other ancient Egyptian gods, Aten was represented by the disk of the sun. Okay, so this is talking about the sun god too as well. We're not going to go too deep in it. We just elaborate how many goddess or gods this has something to do with the summer solstice. It says Apollo, which comes from the Greeks. So the son of Zeus by Leto, Apollo was a multi-faced god in addition to being the god of the sun. So the Greeks used to worship a god named Apollo, which had something to do with the god of the sun. So these other nations was worshiping different gods in different generations around the summertime. And yet another god that was in Greek called Hestia. It says this goddesses watched over domestically and the family. She was given the first offering at any sacrifice made in the home on a public level. It says the local town hall served as a shrine for her. Okay, I gotta keep on reading that. Then you have the Egyptian god named Horus. Then you got another god from the Aztecs, who are the so-called Mexicans. They was worshiping the sun god too as well, but they had a different term. I don't know how to correctly pronounce it. It says the Hutus. I don't know how to pronounce that word. But this was another deity that the so-called Mexicans, who was being referred to as being Aztecs, they was doing back in the day. And this is why they got conquered as well, because they was worshiping a sun god as well. Okay, giving sacrifices unto it as well. But this is when they went off from keeping Yahweh's commandments. But also you have another god associated with the Romans that catered to the summer solstice named Juno. Okay, it says this was a goddess named Juno. It says she is also called Juno. It said Juno Luna, and blesses women with the privilege of menstruation. It says the month of June was named for her, and because Juno was the patroness of marriage, her month remains an ever popular time for wedding and hand fasting. Okay, so this is why a lot of people most likely do a lot of weddings around June, of course, the other nations, because it gives homage to the god or the goddess Juno. Okay, so that's why we do have the month called June. Okay, this is why we do have the month called June, because of the other nations having a goddess named Juno. Okay, this is what we get the month of June on the Gregorian calendar from, the goddess named Juno, which go back to the Romans. Okay, the Romans goddess and deities they used to worship. So they used to worship also a Roman god named Lu, which is a Celtic. And it says Sulis, Minerva is another Celtic Roman goddess or deity. But that's pretty much it. But I just wanted to get out that these are the gods associated with the summer solstice. So when you look at these 10 deities alone right here, in which of course the nations had many more other than what they described, but this is just a scenario on the different goddesses and gods that our people are worshiping, without them even knowing it, that on these particular days, or the 4th of July, or around the time frame period when they give these holidays outlet to be served and worshiped year by year, our people don't know that they're worshiping all these different gods and goddesses associated with the summer solstice. Okay, and also we go to the book of Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 7. It says, thou shalt have none other gods before me. So Yahweh said it again. So we're not supposed to have no other gods but the Most High Yah. Okay, the other nations deal with these other deities all the time. Also go to the New Testament, Matthew chapter 15 verse 3. This is Christ speaking to the scribes and Pharisees when they was going off, coming up with their own tradition that went against the laws of the Most High, this is what Christ said. Matthew chapter 15, verse 3. It says, "But he answered and said unto them, Why do ye also transgress the commandment of Elohim by your tradition?" So you see that, Israel? We transgress against Yahweh's laws by us what? Following the basic traditions of the other nations. But of course, in this concept, the scribes and Pharisees were forming their own tradition outside the laws of Moses. So you can kind of summarize it up today. We go against the laws of the Most High by what? Following the traditions of the other nations. Because basically the traditions of the other nations go back into idolatry, customs, sin. Okay, worshiping other gods. Because we read the commandment in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 7, "Thou shalt have none other gods before me." Okay. Then also Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 14 says, "Ye shall not go after other gods of the people which are round about you." So when it says other gods of the people, that's talking about the other nations outside of the Israelites. So when our people are going after these traditions of pagan customs, of these pagan holidays, what are the children of Israel doing? They are committing sin. Okay, because this is a law in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 14. It says other gods of the people. So that's the gods of the other nations. We're not supposed to go after the other gods, meaning we're not supposed to be following, worshiping. We're not supposed to be bowing down. We're not supposed to be praying to these gods. We're not supposed to be conducting rituals and partaking in the same festivals of these other nations. That's why it says, "Ye shall not go after other gods." So again, these pagan holiday customs, you're going after other gods if you are partakers of these pagan holidays that's been primarily pushed in America. Okay, so the 4th of July is a idol custom that goes back to paganism. Okay, so 4th of July is a pagan custom. Okay, we brought out the history. Okay, let's go to the book of Exodus chapter 34, verse 14. It says, "For thou shalt worship no other God." No other God. You see this, Israel? You see what Yahweh told Moses to tell the children of Israel to do, right? It says, "For thou shalt not," it says Exodus chapter 34, verse 14. It says, "For thou shalt worship no other God. For Yahweh, whose name is jealous, is a jealous Elohim." Is a jealous Elohim. So Yahweh is very what? Jealous if what? If you're worshiping other gods but him. And this is why many of our people get the wrath of him, meaning get the judgments on these particular pagan holidays. Because when you're going into worshiping and following these pagan customs, you're worshiping other gods. You're not worshiping the Most High Yah, which of course you get the wrath of the Most High. Because you're not worshiping the Most High Yah. Okay, this is plain and simple. Okay, this is Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. This is Christ speaking. He's going to show you that you can't say, "I love God, I love Jesus," and you still do the partakings of the rituals of the world, of the other nations, by following these pagan holidays. Okay, you can't serve two masters. Okay, this is the book of Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. This is Christ speaking. This is red letters. Okay. He says, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other." It says, "Or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve Elohim and Mammon." So you see that, Israel? You cannot serve two masters. Okay. You cannot. So you have to forsake one of the masters that you're serving and serve one of the masters. And the master that we're supposed to be serving is Yahweh. Okay, so if Yahweh says don't follow the ways of the other nation, don't follow their customs, don't follow what they're doing with their rituals, don't follow it, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to listen to the Most High Yah because he is our master. Okay, and he sent his son Yahshua right down here to show us how to serve the Most High Yah. Okay, that's why it said ye cannot serve Elohim and Mammon. You can't do both. You have to do one or the other. You have to do one or the other. Okay, and we're gonna get to understanding what the definition of Mammon is. because that's not a common word for a lot of our people to know about. Okay, that's going into riches or wealth or materialism. Okay, this is the word mammon on the Britannica Encyclopedia. This is the definition. It says mammon, biblical term for riches, often used to describe the debasing influence of, it says mammon, the biblical term for riches, often used to describe the debasing influence of material wealth. Material wealth. So we can't say we love the Most High and we serving material wealth. Okay, so you have to serve one or the other. So we supposed to serve the Most High, of course, over the wealth and material gain. We supposed to serve the Most High. Okay, and also to get the understanding more, because like I say, in many cases we don't understand that history repeats itself. And also the modern day term for paganism is called Wicca. Okay, we on this other website that gives somewhat the history of Wicca. It says Wicca is a European neo-pagan religion that we brought out earlier on Wikipedia that focuses on reverence for nature and the worship of gods and goddesses. So that's what Wicca goes back into, of course, is a modern day term for paganism. So that's what the pagans did. They worship other deities. It says for most Wiccans or pagans in general, reference for what is often referred to as the goddess. It says referred to as, hold on. Okay, it says for most Wiccans, reference for what is often referred to simply as the goddess is of particular importance, as Wicca has consistently stressed the importance of feminism. So it says Wicca has consistently stressed the importance of feminism and gender equality. So it's basically on a neutral ground. Male and female could do the same thing. No order, basically. Then it says magic, ritual, and divination are frequently important aspects of Wiccan practice, collectively defined under the term witchcraft. Whoa, wait a minute. So the scholars know the term Wicca or pagan, right? Wicca is a modern day term for pagan, goes back to what? Witchcraft. So we got to go to this Bible to get the understanding how Yahweh feels about people that conduct themselves in witchcraft practices. So again, pagan holiday rituals go back to witchcraft. Okay, that's what the scholar just said. Magic, ritual, and divination are frequently important aspects of Wiccan practice, collectively defined under the term witchcraft. Okay, so if you're practicing pagan customs or Wiccan practices in modern day term, right, you are conducting witchcraft. Okay, and now we're going to go to the law, and the Most High Yah's laws to explain how Yahweh feels about people that conduct themselves doing witchcraft. This is the book of Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 10. There shall not be found among you, it says Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 10. It says, there shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, because they had certain rituals where the men and women were sacrificing their children into the fire or a burning fire to pay homage to an idol god or something like that back in times past, which you was not supposed to do. And it says, or that use a divination or an observer of times or an enchanter or a witch. So the Most High says, there shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire. Or it says, there shall not be found among you anyone that maketh, there shall not be found among you anyone that uses divination or that is an observer of times, that's going into your psychic or you trying to predict the future type of situation, or an enchanter or a witch. Okay, so the reason why we brought that out, we're not supposed to be practicing witchcraft. That's in Yahweh's laws. Okay, and it said Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 11, which will be the next verse. It says, or a charmer or a consulter with familiar spirits. So that's going into witchcraft, sorcery, psychic abilities. That's going into praying to the dead, trying to talk to dead people and stuff like that. Not supposed to do that. It says, or a wizard or a necromancer. So you see this, Israel? It says, or a wizard, which of course we go back to the Gandalf character from the Lord of the Rings. He is a wizard. So again, the custom of the pagan ritual that associated to the 4th of July, right, go back to paganism, witchcraft. Okay. As you scroll up, it has the imagery of Uncle Sam in disguise of a Gandalf character, which go back into being a wizard. Okay, so we're not supposed to be practicing these customs, period. Okay, that's why Yahweh put this in there. So wizard, witch, all the same category. Okay, Yahweh puts them in the same category. Okay. Yep, Yahweh puts them all in the same category. Okay, as you've been seeing. So as you've been seeing. Okay. A witch, enchanter, observer of times, person that use divination, person is a wizard, a person praying to unclean spirits, praying to spirits in general, anything dealing with magical abilities or stuff like that. You're going off into witchcraft and sorcery, which is not a good thing. Okay. Let's go to the next verse to prove that it's not a good thing. Because Yahweh consider those things abomination if you're practicing these things. Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 12. For all that do these things, so if you're practicing the custom of the pagans, which go back to witchcraft, it goes back to modern day term Wiccan, which they just changed the name from pagan to Wiccan terminology, but it all goes back to witchcraft. If you're practicing these things, you are considered being abominable or an abominational practice. Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 12. It says, for all that do these things are an abomination unto Yahweh. And because of these abominations, Yahweh thy Elohim doeth drive them out from before thee. Because Yahweh perceives these things abominable. Not a good thing. It's disgusting for us as a people to be practicing these things. But we was once all into these things before the Hebrew truth came about. But once the Hebrew truth came about, we now are working on repentance to remove ourselves from the pagan customs of this world, because Yahweh does not approve of these abominable practices of pagan holidays. Okay, I'm gonna prove it. Exodus chapter 22 verse 18. This is the judgment of people that's practicing witchcraft, sorcery, divination, enchanters, praying unto familiar spirits, which are praying to the dead spirits and stuff like that. It says, Exodus chapter 22 verse 18. It says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. You see that, Israel? So again, your judgment for practicing these pagan customs or witchcraft customs is death. Okay, this is in Yahweh's laws. Okay, so now you under Christ's grace period, right? To allow you to what? To repent of these evil deeds, so you can get right with the Most High, so you don't get death. Okay, that's the purpose of this channel, Israel, to what? Remove that falsified understanding from the world and now come to the Hebrew truth, so you can what? Worship the Most High Yah in righteousness, not in error. Okay, Galatians chapter 5 verse 19. It says, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, right? These are the works of the flesh. Okay, and this is in the New Testament. Okay, Apostle Paul bringing this out. Galatians chapter 5 verse 20. Idolatry, which we said the pagan custom go back to idolatry, because you worshiping other gods and other goddesses, deities, right? And then it says witchcraft. It says witchcraft. So idolatry, witchcraft, same thing, going into the same similar practices, because why? It's going into worshiping other deities. Hatred, variance, immolations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, right? And then it says, Galatians chapter 5, verse 21, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of which I tell you before, as I have also told you in times past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Whoa, 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 wait a minute. You see this, Israel? You see why I have this channel on Kingdom Builders of Israel LC, right? On YouTube. So you Hebrew Israelites, you blacks, Hispanic, Native Americans can know, hey, this is a major sin that we're doing. The pagan customs of the other nations that we're practicing. If we continue doing it, we're not going to inherit the kingdom of heaven. So you see that witchcraft, idolatry is in here. Okay? And we read the law that Yahweh doesn't approve of these things. He considered those things an abominational practices. And like Apostle Paul said, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Okay, so you Hebrew Israelites, if you're still practicing the customs of the other nations by doing these pagan holidays, you need to repent. Don't do it no more, so you can inherit the kingdom of the Most High. Okay, I understand it may be tempting because all your family members are doing it, right? But you're going to have to forsake all these pagan customs that you was taught in America, because you're not going to inherit the kingdom of heaven if you're still practicing these customs of the other nations, which go back to a pagan history and also go back to witchcraft primarily. Okay, so other than that, Israel, hopefully you enjoyed this quick lesson on celebrating 4th of July as pagan video. Okay, so share this video with your family and friends to let them know that when you're celebrating the 4th of July or you celebrating any pagan holiday ritual in general that's been promoted by America, you are practicing a form of witchcraft, which goes back into idolatry. And also, if you continue doing it, you will be judged in the future on getting damnation. Okay, that's what the Bible just said. It just said, they that which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Okay, Yahweh ain't playing about his word. We read it in the law. He shall what? Not suffer a witch to live. Right? It says, Exodus chapter 22 verse 18, it says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. That's not my words. That is not my words, man. So take this Bible seriously. Repent daily. Learn what you're supposed to do. Learn about the Most High's feast days that we supposed to do. The Hebrew Israelites have their own holidays or holy days. The Hebrew Israelites have their own holy days that they supposed to follow. You know, their own feast days. Okay, follow the customs of the Jews. Stop following the customs of the other nations. Okay, you Hebrew Israelites. Okay, Israel. So other than that, Israel, stay tuned for more videos on Kingdom Builders of Israel LC YouTube channel. And other than that, keep learning, keep studying, and come out of the ways of the world and follow your Hebrew heritage, you children of Israel, by keeping the feast days of the Holy Bible, by keeping the holy days that's in the Bible. Stop following the pagan holidays of the world. Okay, Israel. Other than that, Israel, stay tuned for more videos on this Hebrew channel. Other than that, shalom.